I have considered myself a reader ever since I learned to read, and maybe even before that. I have an older brother, and when he went to school and started to learn to read and write, I remember being filled with the most intense yearning that I'd felt in my young life to be able to do it too. After a lot of badgering, my parents made second copies of my brother's homework and let me learn too. They quizzed me on spelling, and my nana made handwriting sheets so I could practice before starting school. Ever since then, I've nearly never not had a book in my hand. I've lived more lives than I could count, travelled to far-off lands, made fierce friends, and experienced crushing heartbreak. I would recommend reading to every single person I know, and right now I'm recommending it to you. The benefits are as vast as they are incredible. Reading develops empathy and improves emotional intelligence, reduces stress, lowers blood pressure, strengthens brain connectivity, enhances your vocabulary, increases your focus, improves academic performance, and, perhaps most importantly of all, sparks imagination. So, if you're feeling inspired to read, I'm here to answer some questions and give my advice on how to get bookish. You have so much more time than you think you do to read. Even if it's just the very first and last 30 minutes of your day, you'll be surprised at how many books you can get through, and that is so easy to fit in. But let's remember, it does not matter how many books you read. If you read one book a month or one book a year, you're still a reader. Also, having the first and last parts of your day off a screen is so much better for your brain and your headspace. You'll just feel so much calmer and have such a better night's sleep. And I think the key part, especially to having a successful morning routine, is to fill your morning with things that you actually enjoy doing and not just having a checklist of things that you think you should be doing but you kind of dread and therefore don't do them. When I read first thing in the morning, I look forward to it. Like when I'm going to sleep the night before, I look forward to waking up the next day and picking up my book again. So filling your morning with things that you actually love is such a game changer. So my favourite way to start a new book is by settling in with a blanket and a cup of tea for an hour or two. I find reading the first few chapters in one go allows me to really get to grips with the world and the characters, but once I've gotten into the book, I carry it around with me everywhere, even from room to room in the house, and steal back all the little moments of downtime in my day. This could be whilst waiting for the kettle to boil or for my tea to brew, sitting on the ferry. For you non-island folk, replace ferry with bus or train. It could be in the hairdresser, in a cafe, any little pause where you might be tempted to pick up your phone. Pick up your book instead. And if you like challenges or to gamify your life, I've got a few ideas for you. You could do a 24-hour reading challenge. There's a few ways you could do this. I've done it before where I stayed awake for 24 hours straight and tried to read a full book in that time. It was actually so much fun and a really great way to read a book that you think is going to be really impactful because it's just going to be such a memorable experience. And there is no judgment here, but if you are wanting to start reading and reduce your screen time, take a look at how much time you spent on social media last week. You could challenge yourself to spend that same amount of time reading this week instead, or even half of that time. It can feel like a bit of a heavy place online right now, and I guarantee you'll feel much better if you spend that time being whisked off to fantasy lands on horseback instead. So if you're new to reading, figuring out what to read can often be the hardest part, and this is largely just my experience, but I would advise you to not be too heavily influenced by what you see online. I have picked up so many popular book talk books that I've been really disappointed in because I just didn't like them. That's definitely not to say that all of the books that go viral online are inherently bad, but that it's much more important to find out what it is that you actually like. And if you do read a book that you don't like, don't be discouraged. There are books out there that you will love, and reading the bad books is all just a part of finding those books. A couple of years ago, I went on a bit of a mission to start reading widely and really have a journey to find out what I liked, because I just had to come to terms with the fact that high fantasy books are really not for me. I mean, I can't say it as a blanket statement because obviously things like Lord of the Rings are phenomenal, but a lot of the newer, more viral high fantasy books I was seeing online, I didn't really like. They're just not really for me. I found them a little bit too cringy. And so I just had to accept that and move on and read widely to find out what it is that I actually do like. And I've realised that if there is going to be a slight fantasy element, urban fantasy and like more magical realism is much more in my lane of what I prefer. But that has led me to be really specific and be able to say that if a book involves grave digging or studying anatomy in the Victorian era, I will probably love it. Two of my favourite books are Anatomy and The Exorcism of Fairies, and both of these books have a kissing scene in a grave that they've just dug up, and I don't know why, that just has me squealing and kicking my feet like absolutely nothing else does. So what I would suggest is to be guided by your interests, specifically the movies and TV shows that you already know that you like. So if you watch a lot of thriller movies, for instance, it makes a lot of sense to pick up a thriller book first and see how you get on with that. There are also just a ton of movies and TV shows that have been adapted from books. So if there's a movie that you love and it was based on a book, give the book a go. You'll probably love it. And you'll just have that little bit of a leg up because you'll already have such a vivid mental picture of the settings and the characters. For instance, last year I read What the River Knows because it's described as being The Mummy meets Death on the Nile, and The Mummy is hands down one of my favourite films of all time. So that was all I needed to know to sell me on reading this book, and it did not disappoint. I loved this so much. It was one of my top reads of last year. I also love to read seasonally, so whilst we are still in winter, I am only reading books that are set in winter. I find that for one, it helps me to appreciate the season that I'm in a lot more and not be wishing or trying to rush on to the next season, but it also helps me to connect to the book a lot more. And I'm also kind of in the process of sort of assigning genres of books to certain seasons. So in spring I want anything Regency and fairy tale. In summer I'm on the hunt. I haven't been able to find many, but I'm on the hunt for more books that feel like The Mummy or Lara Croft or Pirates of the Caribbean. So if you have any good suggestions, please do let me know. In autumn I try and squeeze in as much reading as I can, because in autumn I want dark academia, I want gothic, I want murder mysteries, and these are my favourite genres. So autumn's always a busy reading month for me. December, obviously I do festive Christmas reads, and then winter is the only season I'm a little bit stuck on because I do only want to read books set in winter. but I'm still on a bit of a journey to find out exactly what genres and types of books I prefer. So my highest recommendation is just to read widely. Read across authors, read across genres, read classics and fluffy romances, read thrillers and horrors and comedies. Like I said, I would highly recommend that you add classic books to your reading list, but I know they can be a little bit daunting, so here are my tips. This is a thing that helped me to read classics more than anything else, and that is to read them aloud. For one thing, they are so lyrical, they flow almost like poetry, they sound beautiful spoken aloud, and it is just a pleasure to speak it. But the main benefit from this is that when you read a classic book, you will almost certainly come across a word that you've never heard of before, or a word that's spelt differently than what you're used to, or complicated sentences or grammar structured in a way that we don't really structure them anymore. And when you're reading in your head, when you hit that point or you hit a particular word or sentence, it can halt your reading and your brain gets snagged on it, and then you're thinking, oh, I don't understand that, and it takes you out of the reading experience. But if you read aloud, you kind of flow over it, and you find that even if there's a word or sentence that you don't understand, by the time you've reached the end of the page, you'll normally have understood it in the context, and it doesn't really take you out of the story. There is one thing that I forgot to say that I think is a massive selling point and benefit to reading classics, is that I find when I am in the middle of reading a classic book, my natural spoken vocabulary improves so much. I'm talking to people and I'm finding I'm pulling out all these words that I don't normally say, and I'm structuring my sentences in a much more of an eloquent way and speaking so much better, and it's really effortless. All I'm doing is reading a book. I'm not doing any extra work or understanding or studying into the material. I'm just reading the book, and I notice myself when I'm in the middle of a classic just speaking so much better. So I would say that is a massive selling point to adding in some classics to your reading list. Now, I don't annotate every book that I read, and I especially don't annotate on my first read of a book, because I don't want to have the experience interrupted or slowed down, or to take myself out of the story too much on my first read. I really just want to be able to flow through it as much as possible. But what I will do is I buy these they're like little packs of annotating tabs, the little stickers, and I use these as bookmarks as I read, so that if I am reading and I find a sentence particularly beautiful, or something really stands out to me, or there's a word that I'm not sure of and I want to research it later on, I can just peel one of these off, stick it in the book, and then I know to come back to it later. So as you can see, when I went through anatomy, I tabbed a lot of things that I love. I think it's a really fun way to read a book, and unless you are studying academically or doing something scholarly, you really don't need to put too much pressure on it. I know some people do whole colour-coded systems for different themes and languages and literary devices, but I really don't. I just tab things that I like, I tab things that I don't like, I tab words that I don't know so I can look at them later. I just tab to my heart's content. Wherever feels appropriate, anything that I want to come back to, I will tab it. And I normally just like to match the colour of my tabs to the front of the book. That's about as colour coded as I get, so you can really just have fun with it. You don't need to put any pressure on it whatsoever. So as I'm going through a book, and again, I don't do this with every book, not every book is that memorable or stands out to me that much, but if it's a book that I really enjoy, I do find I often tab along the way. So then when I get round to doing my reread of the book, as I get to the places that I've tabbed, I have a look at what I've tabbed. I think, does that still stand out to me in the same way that it did? How do I feel about that now? And I'll quite often replace the tab sticker and highlight the text that stood out to me, and then I'll write my thoughts on it. This is my copy of Twilight, which is absolutely filled to the brim with notes, because I have read this hundreds of times and I have lots of strong feelings, some of them good, some of them really bad, but I will write how I feel about that sentence or that page or that scene. Sometimes I have little ramps, sometimes I'm just underlining things and drawing arrows at things, but that's how I annotate. I just treat it like a little diary entry, just me expressing how I feel about the book. And then it's really fun to, as I reread the book over the years, to see how I felt during that time, if my impressions have changed, if I feel a different way about it as I get older and as I have more life experiences, if that changes the way I feel about the book. So I really am just absolutely no pressure, just recording how I feel. Okay, my next piece of advice is that books will wait to be read at the right time. For example, I bought this book, A Natural History of Dragons, when I was 14, 15. I saw it in the bookshop. I thought the cover looked really, really cool. I picked it up without even really reading the blurb. I just went, yeah, that looks cool. I bought it, and for some reason I just could not read it. I never picked it up. I never felt inclined to read it. It sat on my bookshelf for years, and I read this for the first time when I was 28 years old. And I don't know why, all of a sudden it just called out to me. It just felt like the right time to read this book, and I absolutely loved it. And I had that moment at first where I thought, I can't believe this has been sitting on my bookshelf for all these years and I've only just read it and I love it this much. But I also kind of thought, if I'd have read this when I was 15, would I have liked it? And I honestly don't know, because when I was 15, my tastes were a lot different. I was reading lots of True Blood, lots of those vampire-y kind of books, and I'm not sure that this would have been what I was into at that age. But at the age of 28, it ticked all the boxes for me. It's set in sort of a Regency era, but there's also dragons. The main character is very academic but also very adventurous, and goes off on this journey to learn about dragons, and we get to see her process of studying and learning, and it was everything that I enjoy in a book at this age. And I do think it just waited for the right time to be read. So if you do have a book that you think you want to read, or you've bought it or whatever, and you're just really struggling to get into it or struggling to pick it up, I would just say, don't force it. Don't force it. When the time is right, you will read the book, and for the time being, just move on and find something else that you are excited to read right now. Okay, so reading as a hobby can be as expensive or as inexpensive as you want it to be. I think that is the great thing about it, is you can read however you want to. For example, I do like to buy new books every month. I know that I typically read on average 3 books a month, so I will order 3 books online. We don't have that many bookstores here in Shetland, unfortunately, so at the minute I can't go and buy a lot of books in person. So I typically order 3 books per month from Waterstones online, and I know that I'll probably read them all in the month. And if I love the book, It goes onto my bookshelf when I finished it. If I didn't really like it, I will either take it to a charity shop or sell it secondhand online for a couple of pounds, maybe like £2 online. And that's the way I like to do it, because I do really enjoy having a physical record of my books. But you don't have to do it that way. For example, you could buy secondhand books online. If you go on Vinted or Facebook Marketplace, any of these secondhand sites, you can pick up books for £1 or £2. Similarly, the charity shops sell books for £1, sometimes 50p, and you can get some really good books in there. Or if you want to try before you buy, use your local library. Libraries are an amazing resource, because everybody should be able to access books, and if we don't use our libraries, we will lose them. So if you want to read a book before you've committed to buying it, go and check it out from your local library, or there's apps that you can download. I know the Libby app is a really popular one at the moment, and if you like audiobooks or you don't mind reading digitally, if you download the Libby app, you can digitally check out books from the library and either read them or listen to them digitally. And that's a really good way, I think, to find out if you like a book, and then if you love it and you do want to have a physical copy of it, you can go out and buy it afterwards, but that way you're probably not spending as much money or risking wasting money on books that you don't really enjoy. To keep my costs down a little bit, I always buy paperback first. I do just think reading paperback is the ultimate reading experience over hardback, and they are typically a little bit cheaper. So in the UK, a paperback averages for £9.99, whereas a hardback averages £20 per book. So I buy everything paperback first, and then if there's books, the few books that I really treasure and really love, I will look for a special edition or a hardback version of that book and buy it, and then that kind of just stays on my shelf as a little trophy. I don't really read hardbacks, but I will say this is something that I've only started doing recently. There are a few hardbacks that I bought on my shelf that aren't my favourite books, either because I was impatient because the hardbacks are released before the paperbacks. So if you want to read a book when it's new out, sometimes you have to bite the bullet and get a hardback. What I'm saying is there's some books back there that I don't love but I have in hardback. I'm just caveating myself. But yeah, I'll buy paperbacks normally first, about 3 a month, and then read them. I prefer the paperback format because I really don't mind if my books get a little bit beaten up. When I'm reading a book, I live with it. It comes to room with me, it comes to bed with me, I shove it in my handbag, I take it everywhere. I'll read it on the beach, I'll read it in the car, and so they do get a bit weathered and worn in, and I fold down pages if I don't have a bookmark, and I don't mind cracking the spine. I think it's really beautiful that you can see how much you love a book by how changed it becomes after you've read it. All of my favourite books, you can tell they're my favourites because the pages are bent and they've expanded from how many times I've read them, and they're a little bit worn and all the spines have cracked. Like, it's a measure of how much I love a book by how worn in it is. While we're talking paperbacks, I will say that I think in the UK we get the short end of the straw a little bit because our paperbacks are really stiff, and I've bought a few American editions, a few like Barnes & Noble paperback editions, and they're so floppy, and that is, a floppy paperback is what you want. The floppier the better, and I think indie published paperbacks are a lot floppier. Like, I have, this is my current read, I'm reading Anastasia by Sophie Lark, and it's a big old book, it's a chunky book, but look at that flop. That is what you want. You want a floppy paperback, because that way, even though it's so big, when I'm reading it, it just stays open. I can hold it with one hand. I don't have to physically hold the book and keep it open. I can prop it on the side, I can put it down and just read it. Whereas this is the thickest paperback that I could find that's a UK published edition, and this is, see how that just doesn't move? This is what we get, and I think we need to make a collective move to push for floppy paperbacks, because what is this doing? If I'm reading this, like it doesn't stay open. Like you have to either really crack the spine in or constantly hold it with two hands. I couldn't just put this down on my desk while I'm doing something else. Like they don't stay open. So rant over, but a floppy paperback is the best format for reading. Anyway, what was I saying? Circling back, yes, what I'm saying is don't be put off if you don't have a lot of money to spend on reading, because there are so many ways to access books, and like I said, you can spend as much or as little money on this as you want to. Now, I'm sure you've seen online that pretty much every book girly has a book journal, and I am no exception to the rule. Here is mine. She is getting rather thick. And if you are getting into reading, I would really recommend that you start a book journal. It really doesn't have to be anything crazy, anything too artistic. It's just really nice to have a record of what you read, when you read it, and how you felt about it, even if you're just scribbling notes down in a book, because that way you can reflect back on that in years to come. And like I said, if you're doing rereads and it's been 5 years since you read the book, you can see how your impressions have changed over the years. There might have been characters that you absolutely loved when you read it for the first time, and then 5 years have gone past, you read it again and you hate them and you think, oh my god, why did I like these characters so much? Like, it's just really nice to have a record of how you felt about the books when you read them. But that being said, I have gone a little bit overboard, maybe a little bit extra with my book journal this year. So let me give you a little flip through. Okay, so this is my journal, and I'm actually starting partway through the journal this year because I did not fill up that many pages in 2025, and I'm being really good and not rushing out to buy a new book when I've still got so much more pages to go. So we're starting partway through for 2026. I haven't quite finished this spread yet. I really want to add in a picture here of what my bookshelf looks like at the beginning of 2026 so I can track the progress. And then I might put another picture in here as well. But this is my sort of opening page. And then I have a record of how I rate my books. I do use the core pile system, which is, I just think, quite a nice way to standardize my ratings. I will run you through that shortly. And then this page, I'm just keeping a track of everything that I read in 2026. So when I read a book, I will draw it into the shelf, and then I just like putting little knickknacks on the shelves as well to kind of like symbolize the months as we go through. So next we get to my reading records. This is a little key that I've made for myself because I have the number of the book, the title, the author, the star rating that I've given it, how many pages it was, and then in this last column I like to keep a note of if it was my first read, second read, third read, if I didn't finish it, if it was a second attempt of a book that I previously DNF'd. Next page we have a Hall of Fame page. This is going to contain any of my 5-star reads for the year. I will say last year I only gave out 2 5 stars because I am not a person that gives 6-star reads. I don't have like a god tier. 5-star reads for me are the limit. That's as good as it gets. That's the absolute epitome of reading, and so I take that distinction very seriously, and only the absolute best of the best will get a 5-star. So if and when I get a 5-star this year, I will just print out a little picture of the cover and stick it in here. Next up, I've given myself a book of the month page. So for every month of the year, I can choose my favourite book, print out a little picture of the cover and stick it in here. Then I have got a lot of books left over from last year, physical books that I bought and haven't got around to reading yet. So I've drawn them all out into this card. This is my physical TBR, so I'm going to put a focus on reading these books this year, and I can colour in the spine when I read it. And then I also have a page to keep track of any rereads that I do this year. Next, I've got a series tracker. I've done myself a little Dutch door for this one in case I go over this page. And again, I'm really trying to focus on finishing series that I've started. So if I read a book and I know that it has sequels, I can keep a little track. I draw in pencil how many books in the series have already been released, and then I outline it in pen when I buy it, and I colour it in when I've read it. Then this page I have as a genre tracker. I'm not really sure what I'm doing with this year. Last year my genre tracker got a bit wishy-washy because I often find the books that I read could fit into multiple genres, and I wasn't sure if I was just going to pick the main one or make a note of all the genres that a book fell into. So I'm not really sure. I've just started out writing the main genre of the books that I've read at the moment this year and then colouring them in, so I will see how this goes on. I don't know if this is something that I'm going to end up keeping long term or not. And then these I have not quite finished yet, but I have started spreads for the most anticipated books of every season. So I've got my most anticipated for spring all lined up. I am very excited to get to reading all of these. And then I'm going to do the same for summer, autumn and winter. And then I have given myself a page for every month. So on the left hand side I'm going to have my hopefuls list, so every book that I hope to read that month, and then the right hand side is going to be a record of what I actually read, so I can stick in the cover, put the star rating on. These are 2 books that I have read in January as well that I need to stick in, and what I've rated them. I'm having a bit of a slow January. The last book I read, I only rated it 2 stars, so I'm hoping I'm going to find some better books to read soon. But I think I've made it to about July so far. I've just decorated these pages and sort of themed them for the month. This is as far as I've gotten, so this is going to be my July theme, and I need to sort of stick these in and finish off July and then do all the rest of the months as well. And then what I tend to do is, if there's a book that I really particularly want to highlight, something that really stood out to me, I will give it a full dedicated page and write my thoughts on it. If there's quotes that I really like, I'll write down my favourite quotes, I'll put the star rating in. Like I said, I don't do this with every book that I read, but just ones that stood out to me in some way. If I have really strong feelings about the book, I like to capture them. So that's what I'll be doing in these end pages. And then if I still don't fill up this book, which I likely won't, then this will also turn into my 2027 reading journal at the end. So as I mentioned, I use the core pile rating system, which was actually set up by the Book Roast channel. I will give you a quick run through of it now, but obviously head on over to her channel and have a look, because she has updated this, I think, so many times and has so many more in-depth videos on it. But I am using, I think, one of the first iterations, quite a basic version of it, but I just quite enjoy having a more standardized way to rate my books instead of just going off a gut feeling at the end. Although what's interesting is that when I finish a book, I will sort of think, oh, that felt like a 3-star or that felt like a 4-star. and then I will run it through the official rating system, and 9 times out of 10 it does come back as that same star rating. So I think it just works out. I think it just shows that it is a good reflection of how I actually feel about the book. So core pile is an acronym that allows you to rate 7 factors of the book, which are the characters, the atmosphere, the writing style, the plot, the intrigue that you felt, the logic of the world and the rules, and your enjoyment. How much fun did you have with the book? So you basically rate each category out of 10, and then you get an average score from that. So you add them all together, divide by 7 to get your average, and then you translate that into a star rating. So yeah, I like to use it because I think it's really nice to have that time to have a bit of a reflection on what you've read. If you didn't like it, why didn't you like it? Was it just the characters that were unlikable? Was it something to do with the writing style, or were you finding that the rules of the world didn't really make sense to you? I think it's nice to know what you did like and what you didn't like, and just to give yourself that little bit of reflection time, and that way if it is a 5-star you can say for sure, yes, and I know why I liked this, and then you can go out and find books similar, or also avoid future books that might have the similar things that you really didn't like in them.